Hello and welcome to yet another video in this series. Today we are going to talk about Redux. So what you're seeing on the screen is actually what we are going to use today when we say Redux. What you're seeing is Redux Toolkit. However, before understanding Redux Toolkit or RTK in short, let's go back a little in history. So what we say is the term Redux, so we should understand first what is Redux. So this is the official Redux website, reduxjs.org. Redux is a JS library. Mind you, it's a JS library. Redux is just not limited to React. Redux is a JS library for global state management. So the idea behind Redux was simple: to keep all the state and their logic at a single place, separate from your component, separate from your component's logic. The idea behind Redux was as simple as this. That separate space is known as store. So you can use Redux with React and other JS flavors as well, as Redux is a JS library. This is something we should know about it. However, because we are going to use Redux with React, so what we will be studying is the React bindings for Redux, that is React Redux. As of today, we understand Redux with Redux Toolkit or RTK. So that's how we got to Redux Toolkit. From Redux to React Redux, and as of today, it is Redux Toolkit. Well, there is not much difference between React Redux and Redux Toolkit. Some function name changes here and some function name changes here, there, and here and there, which as we go along, I will let you know. So let's start with Redux. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the idea behind Redux is to have all your states and the state updation logic outside of your components in a place called store. So we will start our application by creating what we call as store. So inside your source folder, let's create a file. Now you can name it whatever you want. There is absolutely no requirement to name it as store. Because it does not have to be a component, you can put the extension JSX or JX. That is entirely up to you. Remember, we were studying Redux Toolkit. One difference between Redux and Redux Toolkit RTK was in React Redux, we used to have create store. Because we are using RTK, we will be using configure store. So why not the hinting is there? Well, we forgot to install React and React Redux. Before creating any file, before doing anything else, let's first install both React Redux and Redux Toolkit. Yes, we have to install both of them. Let's start with that. So we can install React Redux like this and Redux Toolkit like this. React Redux @Redux.js Toolkit. Order does not matter. The first thing that we will do is this: install both React Redux and RTK. Done. Fantastic. Let's start with React. So we created a file store.js. If we were using the plain React Redux, we would have used the function create store. In RTK, we will be using configure store. As you can also see in the hinting, configure store under the hood is create store only, but with a little more abstraction. Configure store takes an object which we know as options. For the time being, I'm just putting in a key reducer, which will also have an object, not writing anything else in reducer. Whatever configure store will provide us, we will store in a variable called store. And let's just export that store from here. We will come back to it later and then we'll put something in reducer. So configure store takes an object of reducers and returns the store. In the Redux application, a mistake, in the reducer application, we built the to-do list. Let's understand Redux also with the help of a simple to-do list application. For that, let's create the UI. So let me create a component. Let's call it to-do Redux. As always, let's create a form and a simple UL. Let's also have the type submit on button. There you go, plain and simple. Nothing fancy, no CSS, no Tailwind as of now. Whether we are using use state, reducers, or Redux, this form element has to be controlled. And as you know, for creating a controlled component, we need the value attribute and on change. Now, because we haven't created any state variable and we haven't created reducer, so what should we put in value and in use on change? To put something inside value and to put something in on change, that is a state variable in value and a state function in on change, we need to have both of them. Redux Toolkit allows us to create states and their logic inside what we know as slice. If we were in simple React Redux, we would have created the states and the logics inside this store only. But with RTK, we can have the state and their logic in slice, and then we can export the reducer functions from the slice and import them in store. So for that, let me create another file. Let's call it slice. Of course, you can call it whatever you want because it is not a component. You can have it as JS or JSX. Inside, let's call a function called create slice from Redux.js toolkit. Create slice will also take an options, that is an object, and this will have 3 key value pairs. First will be the name, that is name of this slice. You can put in a simple string, whatever, anything you want. Let's call it to do slice. Initial state. If you remember from the reducer argument, from the reducer video, yes, it is the same initial state. That is an object containing the state variables when the component mounts. So we have an input, which will be a string. We'll have a tasks, which will be an array. And we can have an is editing. We can set it to Boolean false and edit ID, which we can set to null as of now. If you remember from the reducer example, we had a function which contained all the code which modified the state. In that case, it was a single function. Inside we had switch cases. In Redux, we will have different functions for each for different event handler, but grouped inside a single object, which we call reducers. For the time being, let me write just a one function, which will be set input. Set input, camel cased. It will be a function. Just like reducers had 2 arguments, the state and the action object, the same with these reduce functions. That is, it will have the current state and the action object. And what it will do, whatever will be passed in action payload, it will put that in the input variable. The thing to note, however, the thing to note is we are simply putting whatever we want inside state variable synchronously, that is using an equal sign. We haven't done this either in use state or in use reducer. It's not like that we are creating a different copy of the input variable. No. And it might look like that we are trying to change the state variable ourselves. As you know, state variables are immutable. Well, we are not. That is the beauty, that is the abstraction that RTK brings. On a side note, let me write a name here, Immer. Immer is a library that is allowing us to write our state changing logic like this. You have to figure out what Immer is, what actually it does. So this will be the reducer function. We will also have a function called add tasks, which will again have a state and an action object. What this will simply do is, if we have if we have some tasks already in the array, we will spread those, say dot tasks, and we will put in a new object like this. Inside we will have an ID and the actual text that we want to store. That text will be in the input state variable. So we will have something like this. Once again, if you notice, yes, the logic is the same. It is just where we are writing that logic, only that is changing. So let's start with these two variables on these two functions only, reducer functions. However, I want this input state variable not here, but in my UI. And same, I want this set input function not here, but I want to use it here in my UI in the onChange. Point is, they both have to be exported from here and imported into the UI. Also, as we are using reducer functions, so we will be using dispatch as well, right? As soon as the user will start typing in this text box, that is, as soon as the user presses any key, the onChange event listener will be triggered. When that happens, we will be calling, yes, the dispatch function. Now, React Redux gives us dispatch. How we can use that is by a hook called use dispatch. Coming from React Redux, use dispatch allows us to use the dispatch function. So we will simply store whatever use dispatch returns into a variable called dispatch, and we will use that dispatch here. As you know, dispatch takes an action object. Now, another abstraction layer, another simplicity what Redux brings is we don't have to create those action objects explicitly. We don't have to create those objects and pass type and payload by ourselves. The set input that I created in slice, I can use this name as the action type itself. For that, what I will do is something like this. So I'm creating two action types by the same name as the functions, set input, add task. In order to write something in the right hand side, let me also do this. This create slice will give us the slice, will return the slice. I'm simply storing that slice in a variable, let's say to do SL. Now, why I put this name here? Because I want to use that name here to do SL dot actions. Now, what this line is doing, to do sl.actions will create the action creators. In simple terms, will create that object that we can pass to dispatch. Because I want to use set input and add task not here but on the UI, so I'll export them from here. And in my UI, I can use that, I can pass that as an argument to this dispatch. So here I want the set input, so I will pass set input, importing that from slice. And as you know, that set input will take e target value as the payload. So I will pass that e target value as an argument to this set input. Yes, the way we are doing things, that can be a little bit different here, but the logic is still the same. So let me repeat what I have done here. As soon as the user starts typing something, the on change will be triggered. We will call the dispatch coming from Redux store. That dispatch will take set input as an argument. Now, what this set input is, this set input, as you can see in the hint, is nothing but the string in the type key of the action object. This dispatch will take the action object. As you already know, the type in that action object will be to do slice / set input, and payload will be e target value. As soon as the dispatch is triggered, the reducer function will be called. Now, in this case, we have not one but two reducer functions. That is why the type will come into picture. Whichever function name matches the type, that function will be executed. And we will have whatever the user has typed in the state variable input. Now, this state variable input is what I want in my UI to put in the value. However, in order to import the state variable, the state object from the slice, we use another hook called useSelect, again from React Redux. useSelector is a function that takes a selector function as its first argument. That is, it's a higher order function that takes a function as an argument. That function receives the state object from the slice and returns the state object for us to use in our UI. So it will be more clear when I write it. So this will have a function as an argument. That function will receive the state from the slice. That is, this state contains this whole object. What will this function do? It will simply return that state for us to use in UI. Now, here is a small catch. So I can write something like state here. Yes. However, you have to mention state dot something else as well. So what to write here? Let's leave it as this for a moment. Let's go back to our slice. So now we have the action. Yes, but we don't have the state variables in the UI. In order to have the state variables, we call the useSelector, but in order for useSelector to export the state object, we need the name of the store here. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's go back to slice. We exported the actions. Also, let me export something else from here. Do reducer. Just like we exported to do sl.actions, we are exporting to do SL reducer. Now, what exactly is this to do SL reducer? This is the slices reducer object, that is, this equates to this. So we are combining all the reducer functions, because that is what the name reducer signifies. We are combining all the reducer functions and exporting them as one from the slice. And where this will reducer go? This reducer will go to the store. This to-do reducer, well, we have to export it first. This to-do reducer will go to the store. The actions went to the UI. The reducer will go to the store. If you remember, in the store, we had a key reducer which was blank till now. Well, this to-do reducer is what we will be putting inside the reducer key of the store. Now, what does this signify? Well, this thing signifies that the to-do reducer, which is a combination of these functions and any more functions that we are going to write, the to-do reducer and all the state that it manages, all the state that it changes, well, those are now part of the store. That is, those are now global. Any component that is wrapped in the store can use those variables and can modify those variables. Let me repeat myself. Any component or components that are wrapped in the store, they can now use whatever is inside to do reducer. There is one small step that is left. We haven't wrapped anything inside store. Let's go to the main JSX. Right now we have app in here. Let's remove the app. Instead, let's import our to-do Redux. So we'll have the to-do Redux here. Now, as I mentioned, we have to wrap our components that will be using the state in the store. And how exactly we can do that? If you remember from the context example, we used a provider there as well. So we will be using a provider here as well. This provider will be coming from React Redux. So let me wrap our component to do Redux inside that provider. In the context example, provider had an argument called value. Here the provider will have an argument called store and will take our store as the value. Now, please make no mistake, this is the attribute's name, which will always be stored. This is the name we gave to our store. This can be absolutely anything. Since we have wrapped the to-do Redux in our store now, any variable or any reducer function that the store has can now be accessed by to-do Redux and all its children. What does store have? Store has this to-do reducer. And what exactly this to-do reducer is? Well, this to-do reducer is nothing but these functions and all the state variable that they modify. That is, now our to-do Redux can use set input, can use the input variable, and that the name to do reducer, the name in the store to do reducer, well, this name is what we have to write here. Now what will this do? Use selector will now, when it has the reducer name, it will now export this object, which we will store in a variable. Let's call it init state. And in the value now, I can use init state dot input. This is how Redux works. This is how we complete the picture in Redux. Well, let's start React. Let's see if we can have this input as controlled. Okay, so looks like we are missing something. Require is not defined in store.js. Okay. Where does this require came from? Okay. Well, we are not using the common JS syntax. So we have to change this into the ES6 syntax. Right. If we are able to write in this input, well, our work is done. And as you can see, we are. So that is how we made this input a controlled component. And in order to do so, we had the state object from the slice and we call the action from the slice. Now, I will be making this video in two parts. So just so you can wrap your heads around what we just did. In the second part of the video, I'll continue with this program. We will add this task into the array and we will edit and delete it. I hope you like this video. Stay tuned for the next part. Thank you.